Welcome to Unsheltered Conversations, where we explore the people, partnerships, and solutions helping to build a future without homelessness. I'm Scott Larson, CEO of HomeAid America. When we think about homelessness and housing insecurity, we often think about the need for shelter. But many families, especially those living paycheck to paycheck, there's another challenge that is happening simultaneously, and that is food insecurity. Across the country, millions of children rely on school, not only for education, but often for consistent meals and support. When families struggle to make ends meet, the school is frequently becoming the first place where the needs are identified and assistance is provided. So today's guests on the podcast represent an inspiring example of how communities can come together to address those needs. Joining me is my colleague, Taylor Booth, Executive Director of HomeAid Southern Nevada, and Justin Zaricki of TriPoint Homes, who serves as the Vice President of HomeAid Southern Nevada's Board of Directors and the Chair of the Shelter Build Committee. Justin has been involved in every school pantry project, which we're going to talk about today, that HomeAid Southern Nevada has completed. And together, we're going to discuss how these projects came to life, why they matter, and what happens when the building industry uses its expertise to support children and families beyond traditional housing projects. So Taylor and Justin, welcome to Unsheltered Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So Taylor, let's start with you. How did HomeAid Southern Nevada first become aware of food insecurity issues among students and families? What was the thing that sparked your interest in this?
So we were actually approached by our board president at the time, whose wife is a teacher at Laura Deering, a local Title I elementary school. And they actually were the ones that had the idea to turn an empty classroom into an on-site food pantry for students and their families. And then after hearing about their students' issues with food insecurity, we discovered it was affecting almost all of the schools here. And we actually learned that the food insecurity rate is rising each year in Southern Nevada, especially among children. Studies show that 22% of children in Southern Nevada are living in food insecure households, which is up from just 17% a few years ago.
Well, that's amazing. So it's gone from 17% to 22% just in the last couple of years. So were there aspects to that surprised you when you began to learn about this? I mean, it's great that the wife of your board president at the time brought this to you, but what surprised you about the challenges that many of these children face outside the classroom?
I think maybe what surprised me was realizing that you think there's all these resources already out there, that the need is maybe already being met by all of the other local food banks and food pantries. And Three Square has amazing programs where they do weekend meal bags for kids. But we realized there is kind of a gap there, that while students are receiving free or discounted breakfast and lunch and maybe weekend meal bags, they're not necessarily having access to food when they get home for dinner. So we were just trying to help bridge that gap there with our food pantries.
When you were making this decision to get involved with these food school pantries, was there an area that you really felt that you could make an impact? Because on the one hand, it might appear to be small, but what was that trigger when you brought this to your board?
I mean, I think, like you said, it appears to be small, but that's the thing. It's an easy project for us. Compared to our other projects, it is simple and small, and it's something that we are uniquely qualified to do. This is what we do. We build things. So we can turn an empty classroom into a functional pantry with custom shelving, fresh flooring, new paint. And it's something that we just are lucky enough to be able to do somewhat easily.
So for our listeners that are going to be tuning in, can you help them understand that connection between food insecurity and housing instability, and then maybe, unfortunately, homelessness?
Yes, absolutely. So when a family is struggling financially, they're forced to make hard decisions between paying rent, electricity, groceries, and transportation. So school pantries can help relieve some of that pressure. And if a family can access food and essential household items straight from their child's school, it frees up limited resources to go towards rent, utilities, and other critical expenses.
Clearly, this is meeting a very important need to prevent that homelessness from happening. So Justin, let's fold you into the conversation as well. As someone that's come from the home building industry, what was your initial reaction when you learned about this level of need within the local schools, within your own community?
I was completely in awe and shocked that I learned that there's over 400 Title I schools in Southern Nevada.
400. Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. And that's K through 12, and we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg at the elementary schools.
How did this initiative, getting involved with this, resonate with you personally? What was the impact there?
I really wasn't aware of the lack of the resources that the public school system had. I really truly feel that no child should have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. Believe that a parent should have to worry about paying an electric bill or putting food on the table. So
You head up the Shelter Build Committee, which is critically important with all of our affiliates across the country. When this project came, how did you see it as being a good fit for HomeAid Southern Nevada and the builders that you were going to bring involved? Because you're having to make a decision of resources and time, and then ultimately engaging the community with this. How did you see this as a good fit for being adopted by HomeAid Southern Nevada?
I thought it was a natural fit for HomeAid because it combines our expertise in construction and community engagement through our network of builders, trade partners, and volunteers. And, I think the volunteers, especially, we've got a great base with our trade partners and our builders, but, we have people just wanting to volunteer and help do, things with us here at HomeAid. So it was a great fit.
And that's one of the things because, as a builder, you know that when you're building even your traditional homes, that there's only a handful of people that are actually doing the build.
Hmm.
But you have a lot of support people behind the scenes and your office staff. And it sounds like these types of projects engage everybody in the support of not only the building of the food pantry, but maybe the stocking and that community engagement piece. Have you seen that resonate with your teams and your volunteers?
Absolutely. Once the word gets out that we're taking on a project to this nature, the volunteers are coming to us. They are literally knocking down our door to help. So it's great.
That's a unique thing. I think that as HomeAid, you're identifying a very specific need, but then it's that presenting that opportunity and seeing the enthusiasm from not only the builders, but volunteers. That resonates really, really well and validates that decision that you would have made at a committee level to adopt something like this. So Taylor, you listen to an opportunity and then you present this to your board and they're identifying need. And a lot of people never see these things. And what you brought together is just really a great opportunity to identify a need, connect people and resources. So Justin, let's step into some of the mechanics of it. When you identify a school, walk us through what happens. How do you identify what needs to be done and the work that needs to happen with your shelter build committee?
It all starts as, like you said, once a school is identified, Taylor and I start by meeting with the principal at the school, kind of review her needs, her wants. Is it strictly a food pantry? Are they looking for small home essential items? So we can kind of get an idea how that pantry is going to be built and how we're going to utilize that classroom. Once from there, I will draft up a scope of work and then bring it to our shelter build committee. We'll sit down, discuss it, vote it in, and then it goes again one more time against our board of directors. We discuss it, get it approved, and then we reach out for a build captain. And once a build captain is identified, they start with gathering their trades and materials. And that will kick off us to start our food essential drive so we can stock the pantry once it's completed.
Yeah, so that's a great thing. So you're engaging the committee, but the builder, and then they'll engage their trades and suppliers. And then when it's done, you're stocking it all. You're stepping into a school environment, which whether or not it's a classroom or a storeroom, have there been any very unique construction or renovation challenges? 'Cause there's that old adage of construction is one problem after another till it's done. But what have you found as you've stepped into these projects that you've had to overcome?
For the most part, they've been pretty easy. A lot of cosmetic painting and then building in the cabinetry. But, we did a project last summer and we discovered working with the head maintenance guy there that there was a certain clearance that needed to be left between the top of the cabinets and the ceiling grids. We didn't know that that was a thing. They actually have a superintendent for the public school that comes out and does a QC checklist on their schools, classrooms, making sure that everybody's in compliance. So when we were discussing the build, he was like, "Oh, time out, time out, time out. You have to be, 15 inches away from the ceiling or we're going to get written up and we don't want to have that." So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, because when you think of school safety and some of those regulations, I bet they could get rather detailed. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that there's not been a lot of those issues that have come up along the way. I'm assuming that TriPoint has taken some of these on, but when you've approached other companies or even the trades, what's been their response? Because there's so much, they're building all the time, but what has been their response to this particular type of a project?
They love it. They love it. It's a quick project, from start to finish, probably 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So these projects take place in the summertime. So it's a busy time for the building industry, as you know, they're trying to get all of our inventory up for year-end commitments. But it's a perfect project because it is only 2 weeks where it's not going to dedicate that much time from a field captain to go in there and manage it.
Easy in and easy out, because as Taylor knows with other projects that she's been involved with or our colleagues across the country, sometimes pre-development and all the design and construction, it could be years. So it's nice to see an easy in, easy out, a quick win with these pantry projects there in Southern Nevada.
No, it is great. We've had some projects that have lingered on for over a year and a half just because of logistics or whatever the reason may be. So these are great. We've got literally people asking us, hey, when are you guys doing the next one? We've got a list of people that are already on the builder captain wait list, basically. So
No, and that's great because it's validating what they do. They can come in, they can get it done, and it's not a heavy lift. As important as some of the other projects that are done, this is an easy in and an easy out. So Taylor, can you tell us a little bit about some of the schools that you've partnered with and the relationships that you've been able to make along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So far we've been fortunate enough to partner with several Title I schools throughout Southern Nevada, all elementary schools so far. Laura Deering, Paul E. Coley, Bertha Ronzoni, and our most recent will be Hallie Houston. Hallie Houston is actually one of the oldest schools in Vegas. It was built in 1963. And they told us that year after year, they have just been passed up for renovations by the school district. And so us being able to come in and do this food pantry for them, they are so excited and so thankful. And that's one that we're doing this summer. And then Laura Deering, of course, will always hold a special place in our hearts for being the first one, the creator of the idea in 2023. And we are so excited to be building another pantry for them this summer because their building has been rebuilt since we went in 2023. So we actually put in temporary shelving in 2023, knowing they would be rebuilding with the intention to do a permanent one once they were all set. So we are very excited this summer to get to do their second pantry and hopefully final pantry that'll last
Yeah.
forever.
So
Yeah.
you're going to be doing 2 this summer. That's great. So what transformations have you seen take place? Because Justin's talking about it from the builder standpoint, but from your perspective, what have you seen take place from start to finish?
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to get to see an underutilized classroom or one that was just used for storage or random or really with no purpose, getting to turn that into a usable and accessible pantry with new flooring, new paint, custom shelving that a student can enjoy and utilize without shame.
So when you look at it, what have been some of the most rewarding parts to this? Because this is a very unique type of a project. What have you walked away with personally?
I mean, the most rewarding part is always the last day when we do our pantry stocking and then we present the final product to the principal and the teachers, and just seeing the looks on their faces is just so incredibly rewarding. I remember during our first pantry with Laura Deering, when we presented the final pantry to the principal, she started crying and it made me want to cry. She was just so thankful, and to see the emotion on her face and to realize the difference that we were really making just meant a lot to me. And that's why we do it.
So what have you seen with the volunteers that have come out and what's changed with them or their passion?
I mean, the volunteers, like Justin said, are just so passionate about these pantries. There's just something about them. Everybody loves them. They want to be involved. They want to give back. And I feel like it is a tangible way to give back. They can see the difference they're making and they can see the students that they'll be helping. And I think it just feels a little bit more personal to them. Everybody has been so supportive of the pantries.
And then when you've delved into the in-kind donations, the stocking of the shelves, do you create a list? How do you approach that? And what type of drive do you do to stock the shelves of these finished pantries?
Yeah, so for the food, we actually hold a cash donation drive so that we can collect the cash and then go purchase the food ourselves to make sure it's exactly what the schools want, untouched and all of that. But this year, we are actually expanding that to try to partner with other organizations such as Serving Our Kids Foundation, who also does weekend meal bags for kids. We're partnering with them to purchase food through them at a discounted rate to put into our pantry. So we've been lucky enough to have support from the community to help spend a little bit less money on the food and the dollars go further.
I'm glad you touched base on that because community partnerships are so important. And not only is it broadening your network for HomeAid Southern Nevada, but it's raising the profile of this need. I'm really glad that what started off with just the one idea from the wife of a board member, that now you're engaging all of these different players and the ripple effect and getting other community partners involved. That's absolutely fantastic. So, Taylor, you talked about the one principal and the impact on her. Has there been others within the school administration, or is there word of mouth that's happening with other schools for this type of work? And what's the feedback that you've received?
The feedback from everybody, the principals, the teachers, the staff has just been incredibly positive. One thing that I hear repeatedly is they're just so happy to have a dedicated space where resources are easily accessible for students and their families. And they also run the pantries themselves at the school with help of communities in schools, which is a nonprofit that we've worked with to help identify the schools that we choose. And they have been incredible. And their feedback has been so positive that they're finding more and more schools around the valley who want to partner with us in the future to do a pantry in their own school.
No, that's great because it could even be replicated. There are the people that could come in. You set standard and you set a model for what needs to be done throughout probably all these Title I schools. Have you learned anything about the families? I know that with a lot of our projects we build, we don't directly get involved, but have you been able to learn anything about the impact on the families directly?
So yeah, like you said, we unfortunately don't get to interact with the families directly too much since we kind of turn the pantry over and let the school handle it. But I think what I really learned the most is that schools are often the first place that families turn to when they need help. Parents trust the schools, and having resources available right on the campus makes it easier for families to access the support that they need.
Yeah. So, Justin, when you hear about this and see this, has there been a particular moment or a story, a trade, a volunteer that has really stayed with you from these projects that you've been involved with?
Well, absolutely. Last summer, Taylor and I went out to walk Bertha Ronzoni Elementary School to put together a scope of work and meet with the principal out there. And we met in June. School was out of session, and there were volunteers at the school handing out food to families coming by. And I just really never thought about that. The school session's out, okay, everybody goes their way. Summertime's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to go out there and play on the
Yeah.
playground, you know, and there's families that are struggling to eat and they're going to the school to find that meal. And I just never even thought of that. So, and to see it firsthand, it makes what we do that much better.
Yeah. And you're right. As school gets out for the summer and you just think the school's closed and people are doing their business and whatever they're doing, vacations and going to camp and clubs and the park.
Yeah.
But you're right. These families are needing that core resource. So I'm glad that the school has been able to continue to help out in that way. You've been involved with every one of these pantry projects. What keeps bringing you back? Where's your passion with it?
It's just knowing that a child is going to eat. A family's going to eat. A family's going to have an option of what they eat. A lot of these pantries and other organizations, hand out what they have just on hand, but, they get to walk into a fully stocked pantry and make a decision what they're going to have. They don't have to just settle.
Yeah, for something that either may not be beneficial or that they need. As a leader in the building industry and within your company, within TriPoint and on the HomeAid board of directors, what has these projects taught you about leadership and service?
It's not necessarily leadership. It's the community coming together and everybody taking the lead, from Taylor to myself to the build captains to the volunteers. There's nobody really directing anybody. Everybody is just one. And that's what I take out of it.
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things I've seen within HomeAid, and Taylor, you see this day in, day out, and our colleagues across the country. What we do really brings people together, competitors in the industry or people that maybe they've had conflicts with each other, but the work that we do really brings people together in a very unique way for a greater cause. And I just want to thank you, Justin, for playing that role because so much good can happen when we provide those opportunities.
Absolutely.
So clearly, when I look at the built environment of what you've taken an underutilized classroom, storage room, and created a beautiful space that is now dignified. But it's beyond that. Why is dignity and the work that you do so important when you're providing the assistance? Either one of you, what's your perspective of this work and how it ties to dignity?
Well, dignity is so important because everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their circumstances. Any of us could find ourselves in a situation where we need support. And that's why it's important that we create spaces that feel warm and welcoming and respectful so that families can access these resources in an environment that feels safe. They're more likely to seek help when they need it.
Yeah, I think Taylor's saying it. She hit the nail on the head. You just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. and you might find yourself on the other end one day.
Yeah. So these projects, they're strengthening the community, but they're going beyond just providing food. And that's what I think is beautiful about this. Housing clearly is foundational with what HomeAid does, but you're bringing dignity and stability in this area of food insecurity. Families are not just having to choose between food, rent, and transportation utilities. You're bringing it together in a way that is filling some gaps that hopefully brings them not only dignity, but security in all aspects of their lives. You've relieved a critical component that then allows them to maybe take a step back, take a breath, and focus in some other areas because they're not having to deal with so much elements of food insecurity. So, Justin, you've been involved with the building industry for many, many years. Why do you think the building industry is uniquely positioned to solve these types of community challenges?
Because we have the resources, we have the relationships, and we have the funds to do so.
And the passion. I think that is such a unique piece that you've touched on earlier. This industry is very entrepreneurial and with resources, but when you bring that entrepreneurialism and passion, it's just amazing to see it unfold.
Absolutely.
Have you been able to approach other builders about these types of projects or broader? And how do you talk to them about being involved with community service projects like this?
It's a simple question, but it's what is stopping you? What is holding you back?
Yeah.
Giving back to the community. It doesn't have to be, a 5,000 square foot house that you're building for them. We're asking, for 20 cabinets, a little bit of paint. So yeah, the question is why not?
I love that. Why are you not? Why not? Because they have so much to give and so much to offer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're serving on the HomeAid Southern Nevada board. How has that impacted you? You're in a very key role, not only as the vice chair, but with the build committee. What have you seen that for you personally?
It's just how accepting everybody is, how we all understand what our mission is, and what more can we do to give back. These pantries, honestly, are probably one of the best things that's happened to us here in Southern Nevada because there wasn't always a renovation to do. There wasn't always a ground up build to do. So we're finding ways that we can honestly give back, and that's what it's about.
Yeah. So Taylor, Justin just touched on a key thing. This has given really a unique opportunity for HomeAid Southern Nevada under your leadership. What has this done to strengthen relationships with HomeAid and the broader community?
I feel like these projects have really allowed us to build relationships in a meaningful way because rather than simply just writing a check, we're bringing together our builders, our trade partners, volunteers, the schools, and our community partners to work towards a common goal.
And then do you see it expanding there in Southern Nevada?
Yes, yeah, we already have this summer. The past 3 years, we've done just one pantry every summer. And this summer, we are doing two. So we are already expanding. But we plan to add new schools every summer and keep expanding as we can. The need here is great. And our goal is to not just create these spaces, but to also help ensure they remain stocked and accessible for years to come.
And this might be a rhetorical question, but do you see this program being able to be replicated with your colleagues, other affiliates across the country?
Absolutely. I think any of the affiliates can adopt this model. But I think really the biggest lesson is just listening to your community and seeing what their unique needs are. There's not always the possibility of building an entire shelter or doing a giant renovation, but the pantries are easy, small, and simple, and everybody deserves a meal. And if we can utilize our resources to keep students and their families fed, why wouldn't we?
Yeah, so that's, I think, a very unique thing with the HomeAid model is that you're able to identify some very specific needs in your community, see how you can meet those. And it could be a ground up shelter construction project, housing. It could be a renovation. It could be a bathroom remodel, but it could be, just really looking at that comprehensive community engagement through not only the construction, but we've touched on community engagement. And then ultimately, all that you're doing is educating people about issues in your community, about housing insecurity, homelessness, and then ultimately how we're going to meet the needs of your specific community. So Justin and Taylor, as we step into wrapping up, I just have some rapid fire questions for both of you. So Justin, what's your most memorable pantry project that you've been involved with?
Absolutely. The first one, Lower Deering Elementary, it opened the world to us, from the initial build of just putting temporary shelves in, going to collect the food from the Costco's and the Walmarts around town. I think we had 6 or 7 pickup trucks filled with pantry items. And then all the volunteers that were there. There was 14 people that volunteered. and half of them, we met for the first time that day. So it was just great, and then to watch the teachers walk in and see this classroom that they were using just as storage for miscellaneous stuff turned into a full blown pantry with a clothing rack, and kids could go shopping. And it was just, yeah, more enduring.
Yeah, that's great. So flipping to kind of what you do for a living, what does home mean to you?
Home to me is a place that I feel safe when I lay my head down. And that could be in a tunnel, on a park bench, and it could be in a bedroom, but that's what home is just a place I can feel safe.
Well, I want to thank you for what you do with not only home in Southern Nevada, but as a builder, because you're right, home is so essentially important. And what you do is a very noble thing in your day to day work because it's providing a sense of place, it's providing a sense of community. So thank you for what you do in your day job, and thank you for what you're doing with Taylor
Uh,
in Southern Nevada.
it is honestly my pleasure. And I wake up every morning looking forward to this. So it's great.
So, Taylor, what's been your most inspiring moment as the executive director of HomeAid Southern Nevada?
There's been a lot, but one moment I think back to and reflect on a lot happened about 5 years ago at one of our pop-up shop events where we provide free clothing and shoes for those in need. And I remember this little girl was there who couldn't have been more than 3. And at that point in the day, we had run out of any children's shoes that were in her size. So there were none we had that fit her. And so one of our volunteers, who is now our current board president, refused to let that happen. So she went and got in her car, drove down to the store, got a couple pairs of shoes, and came back with, I remember, the cutest little pink tennis shoes for this girl. And I'll never forget the look on her face when she tried them on. She was so excited and so grateful. And it was just a small moment, but it was something that's really stayed with me all these years.
And what's so beautiful about that, Taylor, when I first joined HomeAid, one of my board members told me, Scott, you have the opportunity to not only affect and impact, people that are in need, but people in the building industry as well. So Taylor, you had that opportunity to, obviously this little girl got some shoes, but you provided that opportunity for that individual, that board member to go get those shoes. And what a beautiful thing that was. So that's wonderful. Back to the topic that we've been talking about. What's one thing most people misunderstand about food insecurity?
I think there's a common misconception that that'll never happen to me. The reality is that 59% of Americans are one missed paycheck away from having to make hard choices themselves between paying rent, covering utilities, or buying groceries. And food insecurity can affect anyone. And that's what
Yeah.
I think people really misunderstand.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly today with the rising costs of food and choices that are being made, it's very real for everyone. So, Taylor, as you're doing this work, what gives you hope? Because there's so many challenges, so many things that are out there that could be barriers and obstacles. What, as the leader of HomeAid Southern Nevada, what gives you hope?
I think just seeing the continuous support from our community just truly gives me hope. Even when times are tough, like I know they are right now, our community is continuously showing up and standing up for us and those we serve, whether it's through donations, volunteering, leading a project. They know what we're doing is important and they want to help however we can. It truly gives me hope.
That's great. So, as we wrap up today's conversation, I really appreciate both of you being on the podcast today. Taylor, will there be information about the food drive? How can people support you as the summer comes to a close? And what can we do for you?
Yeah, if anybody wants to support, we'll have information on all of our social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, HomeAid Southern Nevada. There will be links to donate cash donations. If you're not here physically in Southern Nevada and can't donate physical items, we are collecting a couple of extra items for each of the schools as well. But a great way to support from afar would just be supporting cash for us to purchase food for the pantries.
As we wrap up, this conversation truly reminds us that homelessness prevention and housing stability often begin long before someone actually loses their housing. And sometimes it starts with ensuring that a child, as we've talked about today, has access to food. Sometimes it means helping a family through a difficult month, utilities, et cetera. And sometimes it means creating partnerships like we've talked about with companies like TriPoint and others that strengthen an entire community. And I just love how the story represents the very best of HomeAid. And you've identified a need, you've brought people together, you've leveraged the talents of everyone involved, and it's creating a lasting impact, not only for the schools, but for the families and children. So I really appreciate both of you. And These projects, although they're small, they may not be able to be measured in beds built or square footage completed, but the impact on the children and families is absolutely profound. So thank you both for your leadership and for helping build a future without homelessness. Any closing thoughts or comments from either one of you as we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you to you in helping Taylor and I spread the word across the country that, there's a need for food in our schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you both. I'm Scott Larson, and thank you for our listeners for joining us today on Unsheltered Conversations.